Ready? Hello and welcome to this Sorry, we're just muting my computer because we have there we go, we're fine. Hello and welcome to the UK Healthcare Tableau user group. This is our first event proper. We relaunched in January with a little introduction and hellos to you all. So this is our first proper event and we are thrilled to be here at Salesforce Tower hosted by Tableau. Here is the agenda for today. So you're getting a warm welcome, hopefully, from us, and our in-person attendees has hopefully enjoyed their lunch and the cupcakes sponsored by AWS. Thank you very much for those. We are then kicking off with Alex Clift, who's going to talk to us about pre-wireframing. Alex is a bit poorly today, so he is joining us virtually. Then Sarah Bartlett will deliver dashboards that deliver to us. And then we'll have Rohit Saeed Hassan. He'll be talking about engaging customers from practice to theory. After that, Steve will lead a workshop with you all. And he's popped some stuff in the chat for our virtual attendees so you can see and go along as well. And then we will have a sneak peek at what we've got in store for you in our autumn tug. And we will do a swag prize wheel where in-person attendees and virtual attendees could win $30 to spend at Tableau store. So who are we? Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm one of your co-leads for this tug. I work at NHS Arden and Gem CSU. But I've been around the NHS since about 2008. At work, I use Tableau, obviously. It's my tool of choice. And I'm really passionate about enabling good data visualization for all. Outside of work, I enjoy theatre, and I'm a member of a couple of my local theatre groups. I have 2 cats and a boyfriend called Dave. And I live in Lincolnshire. And I'll let Steve introduce himself.
Apology, I forgot to update the picture. I've shaved because it's got too much grey hair in there. Hello, everybody on virtual as well. So I'm Steve Adams. I do Tableau training and coaching, have done probably for about 10 years now. I'm freelance, work on my own, but more importantly, I just enjoy working with people in the NHS, as well as other organisations to help empower people to add the value that they know they can in their own organisations. I personally prefer people within an organisation to be enabled to actually who understand the data and understand the business to actually do what they need to do. That's my remit there. I didn't even think about some notes. I've got some notes there. Wow, who wrote those? They're from last time. Oh, I won't repeat that then. My life outside of Tableau is, well, it was Father's Day at the weekend, wasn't it? So I'm Super Daddy-O because my kids love Super Mario. And that's about it. So I'm a father of, I think it's 3. Yeah, it's 3. I mean that because one of them doesn't live with me, not because I'm being obtuse. Okay, so thanks very much, everybody. We're going to move on quickly.
Hello. So yeah, this is a Tableau user group, and without you, the users, we are nothing. And so it was with that I have these lovely QR codes on the screen here. Please click on this one. If you want to host a tug, if you have a venue, if you have a boardroom, if you have anything around, I know, Sarah, I've seen you. If you have somewhere to host us that has AV equipment and whatnot, so we can host virtually, because that is such an important component of this tug. We pledge to always be a virtual hybrid tug. So we want to come to anywhere in the UK that you'll have us, because we are the UK healthcare tug. So we will come far and wide to host in a locality near you, but always pledge that we will also be online so that it is accessible to all. So please let us know if you can host. And another big thing is speakers. If you want to speak at a tug, if you've got some really cool work you want to show, if you have some top Tableau tips, please go onto this QR code and let us know what you'd like to talk about, because we would love to hear from you. And I'm going to hand over to Dave, and he's going to talk about just give you a little prelude to his workshop so you can get thinking during our presentations.
Thanks very much. And also for speakers, it may be that you haven't completed something. You might be halfway through something and you want some input from other people. More than happy for you to come at any stage of your projects as well. Okay. So as Charlotte said, oh, yeah, why not? I'll throw that down there. That was me. As Charlotte said, we're going to do a workshop later on. We're going to do split into groups here in person, and online we're going to have some breakout rooms. And in a moment, I'm going to hand out to everybody in the room some sheets so you can actually take some notes while you're watching the three excellent speakers. Okay, because in those breakout groups, I want to see you again. We want to see you again, and therefore we want you to get some real value. And the best way to actually get some value from an event like this is to take something home with you and do something. Okay, so what we want you to do is take away 3 action points specifically that you know that you can actually implement when you go back home. In fact, the first action point you'll be doing before you leave here. Okay, so as you go through, please jot down any ideas that come to mind. I should have put these in the notes as well, that come to mind during the presentation, and jot down anything on there, whether it be actions or tasks or questions, or potentially it's just terms you're hearing which are useful for you to communicate internally as well, because quite often you hear other people presenting using words and phrases which are very useful for you. So jot those down as well so that you can improve the way you can communicate with your stakeholders as well. We'll be thinking about then obviously wanting you to put down smart actions, obviously, because we want you to take action. Planning time in your diary as a non-negotiable. So basically, in order to actually do those actions, implement them, you're going to want to plan some time in your own diary so that you can actually follow them through on those. Okay, so as you go through the 3 presentations, the excellent presentations we've got coming, document the benefits as they arise and review periodically, because what we're thinking about you might need to do, for example, is build up your own business case. Coming here costs time and it costs money, and you need commitment from people to enable you to come to future events. So build up your business case as you go through, taking the action points from these presentations so that you can communicate around those points and the value that you're obtaining. And if you're obtaining value, then please encourage others within your organization and other parts of the NHS and the UK healthcare fraternity to come along to these events in the future, whether it be face-to-face or online. Okay, any questions on that? Yes. Yes, we will. We will. Well, we need to check with a couple of people about if that's okay with them. But yeah, the idea is we will be sharing the presentations of the people coming up as well. Cool. So, for example, I'm going to be handing out these, and if you're on virtual, then there's a link to a Google slide, so you can actually fill these out online. Hopefully you can grab some pens. We've got some pens over here if you haven't got any. It's really just a case of just noting down ideas as you go through your top 3 ideas, and also the actions that you think you might need to put in place. And for example, oh, that's blank. Oh, there you go. I had a sneak peek at Rohit's presentation, so I'm just putting this down as an example. These takeaways really should be your personal top 3, in the sense that, you know, you might know 99%, but there's a 1% that you're going to walk away, which is going to be valuable to you. So put those down and then think about the ideas. By the way, if you don't write anything down on the sheets of paper, Earlier on, Charlotte showed you the QR code for being able to present next time, right? Because that means you're not learning, but you can teach other people, okay? So ideas, maybe brainstorm as you go through, and then think of some actions. It may be that you haven't got any specific actions when you're noting it down, but later on in the work breakout time, that will be a time to consolidate your thoughts with other people as well. So it may be then that you're walking away with those concrete actions. Okay, that's the idea. Hopefully you'll get some value from today as a result of doing that. And before we move on, we're going to hand over to Alex, who is virtually sick.
Hi, can you hear me, Steve?
Yes, we can, Alex. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen whilst we're doing that. Yes, really unfortunate I couldn't be with you today. I've got a cold, probably the worst cold I've had for a couple of years. You can probably hear it in my voice, and I just thought I would not come and infect everyone in the room with that. So shame I couldn't be there, but hopefully this presentation will work pretty well anyway. All right, let me do this and then I can introduce myself. So first of all, for those who've not met me, Alex Clift, I'm a solution engineer with Tableau. Been with Tableau for a bit over 8 years. And I now run the solution engineering team for public sector all across Europe. But when I was working as a solution engineer, I was really focused on the NHS. And this was me at one of the NHS Expo events. I love getting up in front of a room full of people, talking about Tableau. Love introducing Tableau to people for the very first time as well. And just on the side there, you can see the kind of books I've got right here on the shelf next to me. So I do kind of hobby interest in dashboard design, data visualization, all of these things. And, you know, as we'll see, the process and thought processes that go around this as well, I think are really, really important too. Let's just, so a little bit more context. So healthcare is in my blood, you could say. So this is, well, it's not quite my dad, but it could have been my dad. So he was a radiographer, and then he spent the rest of his career working, operating a CT scanner, MRI scanner in Worthing Hospital. My mum also was an agency nurse for years, so lots of NHS there. My wife's family are all in general practice as well. They're all doctors. So the kind of conversations that often we're having in a work context about the priorities and challenges in the NHS, also the sort of conversations I'm used to having around the dining room table at home as well. Okay, now the topic for today, just a little bit of a story. So a few months back, Steve posted something on social media, I think LinkedIn, and I kind of commented in reply. And the point I just wanted to make, I didn't really give it much thought at the time, but he'd commented something about wireframing process. And I kind of jumped in. It was just something I've been thinking about recently. And I said, well, what about the questions that you might ask before you start wireframing? And this kind of started a bit of a back and forth. And then, you know, Steve said, well, it would be great if you came to the user group and presented on that topic, because I'm sure people will be interested to know what you think about that. And that's what's really led to me doing this presentation with you today. I started with my preparations, you know, with a few ideas, but pulling it together in recent weeks, I thought, well, it'd be interesting to know, you know, what different people think the idea of a wireframe is and how it is applied. So I asked ChatGPT the other day, what is a dashboard wireframe? Now, there's a lot of words on the screen. I don't expect you to read all of those, but I've just picked out a few of the key words, which I think highlight the way that people expect wireframes to be used. So it's about the layout and structure. Especially, it is usually intended to be used before the dashboard is fully designed, if that makes sense. And I'll come back and talk about that topic in a bit more in a few minutes' time. But many people consider it to be an absolutely essential step in the design process. And it's interesting when you start looking into wireframes, what you'll find is, there are people who are making careers out of teaching wireframing technique. I even found there's a wireframing kit. In fact, more than one organization that are offering a wireframing kit with little kind of whiteboards and whiteboard pens and things that allow people to mock up their wireframes. There's an industry around this approach. And I thought that was very interesting because, I think you could easily fall into the trap of thinking, well, actually, it's just as a sort of prudent step people recommend of sketching it out on paper before you start anything in the software. But actually, there is more to it than that. So there's context there, there's history in terms of what wireframing is about and how to do it. And I'm not going to go into full detail about those processes that are followed. I'm really more interested in kind of what happens before you might start wireframing. Okay, so I threw an example wireframe. And it was very interesting. So I thought, well, it would be nice to have a wireframe. I can put it on a slide and then talk about it when I'm doing the presentation. But one very interesting thing happened when I started doing this. So I literally just pulled up my pad and paper and I started drawing, as you can see here, fairly conventional, I would say, sort of dashboard layout with some KPIs, a sort of a middle section in the middle of the screen where I imagined a scatter plot and then some dimension breakdowns across some of the metrics, and then sort of towards the bottom of the screen, more of a tabular view, sort of maybe more granular data or something. But what happened when I was doing this, I found it very, very interesting. And I think it actually highlights one of the concerns that I have about the conventional approach. But even just when I was doing this on pen and paper, without any data set in mind at all, my creative kind of thought process started getting carried away with itself. And I found myself thinking, a tabular view is going to be excellent. I'm going to have a little spark lines. I'm going to have some conditional formatting, different colors meaning different things. And I was imagining this dashboard coming to life even before I had a clue what the data set was, who the audience were, what the purpose of this dashboard was for. It was almost like the wireframe itself started taking on its own life and started sort of influencing my thinking before I even knew what I was doing it for. And I thought that was really interesting. So anyway, I stopped myself and I said, okay, maybe it's time I actually got some data, and then we can have a look at something in real life a little bit. So this is what I did. So topical at the time, I think, recently some of these headlines have come through, and I thought, well, it's something I was thinking about. I thought, well, I wonder if I can find some data around dentist numbers in the England. And that's where I went. So let me just jump out of this now, and I'll show you then what I did. Let's have a look in some actual Tableau. So just a very quick sort of summary in terms of what the data set looks like. That's what this first tab really is showing. So what the data looks like, I've got a breakdown here. It's England only, but it's broken down by region, by commissioning region, by year, and then I've got metrics that give me population and the total number of dentists. So it's quite a simple data set. There's not many dimensions or measures and things in there. But when I saw this, I thought, yeah, this is going to fit really nicely into my wireframe. And then I started thinking about those nice spark lines again, and my conditional formatting and everything. I still wasn't that interested in the data. I was more thinking about just my nice wireframe dashboard. So let me show you then what I created with that wireframe in mind. So as you can see, 4 KPIs across the top of the screen. I always think it's important to put a little context alongside where you've got a big number. Is that number going up or down? Has it changed much? The big number on its own might not mean much. So I've got different KPIs here that have come out of the data. I've got my scatter plot, which, I've got my 2 measures. So that was quite an easy one to just put that onto the screen there. I've got a bit of a breakdown by one dimension, the region. That was quite easy. And again, rather than just having one measure in the bar chart, because I've got two measures, I've just put them like this, and that means that I can, I quite like doing this sometimes, so you can sort according to the different measures, and you might have them ordered differently as a result of that. Similarly, I've got another dimension. Now, I have to admit, this is a terrible way of visualizing a time series, but because of the way that the data is recorded, it's not quite a date. It's sort of it's a label for a year. And I was sort of more interested in maintaining my wireframe design at this point. So I kind of went with that approach there. And then I've got my tabular view, if you like. Now, I could have just represented all of these just as numbers, but I quite like the ability to show all these for the different commissioning regions, showing the different metrics across there. And one of the reasons I like to do that is because, when you are then able to sort, it allows you to ask and answer quite a good range of questions. So I quite often go with that sort of approach, and I think it still fits that description of being a tabular view. And then into the dashboard as well, I've added a little bit of interactivity. So, if you start now to click on a particular region, you're going to see certain things happen. So some of the points are filtered. You might get some highlighting going on as well. It just allows a certain range of answer and, question and answer through that user experience with the dashboard that you have here. Okay, so pretty pleased with that. My wireframe is standing up well here, and I like the fact that it's come together. I could have definitely taken it further, I would say. So for a start, I've not really thought about color in this. I could certainly make more use of color. I've not taken the time to do anything very interesting with the tooltips. Again, certainly I would probably do that if I was to spend more time on this. The other thought that I'm having with this is I've just made an assumption. So I've kind of gone with, and this is often the case, where I've got a data set, there's a little bit of time history on there, but I kind of make the assumption that I'm interested in the current status. So what's the most recent data telling us? I've got here these little bits here with the arrows up or down, which show me then is that measure kind of going up or down compared to the previous time point in the data. And that's nice, but it just gives me up-to-date information, really. All right, so let's jump back to so what's wrong with that? Now, I think the danger that I'm falling into there is I'm letting my wireframing process kind of take control. And one thing I've learned as I've explored this and researched this topic is actually there are two schools of thought, and we'll get quite animated in this discussion, because you can see I've gone with my wireframe approach, and then I've brought the data in, and I've approached it that way. There's another group of people who say that that's not the right way to go, because actually once you start bringing in the real data, it may not fit your wireframe. Or maybe when you start looking at the actual data, you may realize there's something much more interesting that should influence your design decisions. And maybe your wireframe actually is wrong, or is not allowing you to explore that or display that in a meaningful way. So there's two schools of thought. There's a fork in the road, and there's a decision to be made. Which road is best with these things. Let's go back and look at the data again. Here we go. Get back to here. So there's one small thing that shows up on this dashboard, which actually is really significant. And the way that the information is displayed right now you could very easily miss it. So here in 2020, 2021, there's actually a drop in the number of dentists at a national level. And obviously that was the year where the effect of COVID was felt. Now, because I was not really thinking about the impact of time on these measures within this data set, and I was thinking about other things, I didn't really at first pick up on that. But let me show you, if you do come back and look at that in a bit more detail, here we are. So in fact, I kind of jumped ahead of myself one section almost, but you can see there, let me just go back a step if I take the region off. So you can see there at a country level, if you aggregate across all of the commissioning regions, that's what happened during the COVID time. So you go from 2019, 2020, the highest, the peak number of dentists in the country, and then suddenly this big spike, this drop down here. And then there's a recovery. And I realized when I saw this, and it was only really by chance when I was working on other things in the data that I saw this, but I realized there's a story here, and it's probably much more interesting than the story I was telling with my wireframe first approach to the dashboard. Because I think the story here in this data set is about the impact of COVID and then the recovery that's come along afterwards. And, you know, very quickly, this is what I was showing a moment ago, if you drop in the region on here, it adds another element to the story, because I think the recovery is not equal across the country. So you've got here, for example, in green in the Northwest, there seems to have been a dip during the COVID time, but then the strong recovery, and actually the dentist numbers now are higher than ever. By contrast, you look at the Southwest, or which one is this? I think the East of England, you know, those numbers, they're continuing to drop. So it feels to me like there's something more interesting to explore here, which is about that story of the impact of COVID, and then the fact that some regions are recovering more effectively than others. This started a thought process in me that led to a much more data-driven thought process. I threw my wireframe out the window, and I went back to saying, okay, well, I think there's an interesting story here. How am I going to package something together which allows people to explore this, maybe focus in on their area, and understand where this recovery is happening well and where it's not happening so well. And that led me to this. So exactly the same data set in use here, but you can see now I'm focusing on certain aspects of what's happening in the data. So the impact, so moving from one year to the next, 7.67% drop in dentist numbers at a national level. And then the recovery, so moving from that COVID year, actually 2 years later, you know, how's the recovery faring? So the country has bounced back, not quite as high as they were, but there's been fairly significant bounce back. But then when you start to focus on particular regions, you're going to see a different story. So this is what the dashboard allows now. So you can start to focus in and say, okay, well, for a particular region, let's see how that recovery is faring. Which commissioning regions within that region are bringing back and having the most positive change in dentist numbers after, and which ones are not. And you do start to then to get some interesting details in this data. Now, for me, this becomes then a much more interesting conversation. It's an exploration of the data, and this dashboard allows people to explore and investigate this question, which the previous dashboard just didn't really draw attention to at all, or didn't really allow anyone to explore. So for me, I think this highlights and kind of characterizes the challenge around wireframing and the process that people might follow when they approach a dashboarding project. Because the temptation to go in wireframe first and then find data, create visualizations that meet the expectations of that wireframe, it may lead you down a path where actually you're missing the more interesting, more valuable insights which are in a data set, and the opportunity to craft a user experience allowing people to explore that. So hopefully the dashboard examples that I have there do highlight and illustrate what I mean with the potential challenge that you have there. Let me come back to data here. So what can you do about this problem? Now, I think first of all, I will say this. So, and I think this is true for an individual person who's working on a dashboarding project for themselves, or for a team of people. I think it's essential to iterate. So you start with an idea in mind, a question, a request, whatever it is that's initiating the project. And then you have to expect it's absolutely fine to go round in a cycle. And you may need to bring people on board with you as you go around, because otherwise you may just feel like you're on a track and you're on a path which doesn't allow you to stop and challenge whether what you're doing is going to be effective or not. So for me, iteration is an essential part of this. Other aspects I would really draw people's attention to. So first of all, you have to think about who is going to use the content that you're creating. Very often, in fact, in my experience, it's quite rare that you are going to find yourself making a dashboard that's only for your own use. Now, I've certainly done that in the past, and one of the ways that situation changes things is because you no longer have to think about how someone else is going to respond when they see it. So if you're making something for yourself, you can make it very simple. You don't have to worry about labeling things. You don't have to provide any help information. You can use whatever colors and things like that you want. You have complete freedom and flexibility. Whereas if you are making it for someone else, you really have to think about all of those other aspects. They haven't been in your head during the design process, so they don't know how they're intended to interact with it, for example. All of the kind of the signifiers that draw their attention to the different types of user experience, where they can filter, what might highlight, all of those things. When you're just making it for yourself, you have that freedom to put things in that are there. You don't need to worry about making sure someone else knows that they're there as well. During the design process, I think it's essential that you include actual users in that iteration. Get their feedback, show them the content, ask them, am I on the right track? Is this going to answer the questions that you have? And that's really the key point as well, I would suppose, out of all of these points, is the questions that those users are going to ask may not be the ones that you think they're going to be. Now, this actually has a material effect on your dashboard design, sometimes in terms of the way that you choose to represent metrics, for example. Now, I don't know if you'll have noticed, but on the first dashboard I had sort of absolute numbers. So I had the number of dentists. And in small numbers underneath that, I would have the percentage change, because my assumption is that people are more interested in the absolute numbers, and it's just a little detail, whether that's a percentage change up or down. But actually, over time, when a user comes to a dashboard, especially once they become familiar with it, you might find that it's that small number that gets people's attention, and the absolute number can fade into the background or just be included on a tooltip or just small against it. So the second dashboard I created, the percentage change was the big number for me, because that, for me, I think was telling a more interesting story. Lots of assumptions going into that. I haven't actually tested it out on any real world user to ask them the question, but I'm starting to second guess and think, well, actually in time, I think, especially for the regular visitors to this dashboard, they're going to focus on the percentage change rather than the absolute number. One essential point there at the bottom. So are the users going to access on a mobile or on a laptop? So with Tableau, especially with the introduction of Tableau Pulse recently, we are increasingly seeing people mobile first in terms of their interaction with data, with metrics, with dashboards. And the expectation that we used to have, where people were going to have that nice kind of dashboard layout, filling a screen on a laptop screen with all of the kind of interaction that you get through operating a mouse, it really changes things when you think, well, actually, for this piece of content, the majority of people are going to be on the move. They're going to have their mobile device with them, and that's how they're going to interact. So, Tableau supports the dynamic layouts, lots of detail that helps you to configure dashboards for that mobile setting. And obviously with Tableau Pulse providing a really mobile first user experience, I would say. But if you don't know where your users are going to be, you don't know which sort of interaction and which sort of user interface you need to be preparing for them. So it's really important to get to know them. Where are they at the point when they want to look at the dashboard? What's the decision that they're making at the time? What information do they need to hand right there? Just to come back to the question, I mentioned this already, and I think it's a really important aspect when I come to thinking about dashboard design. And again, it's something that I think is true whether you're making something for yourself or for a group of other people. So what is the decision that is going to be made as a result of someone looking at the dashboard? What question does somebody need to answer? Now, are they going to be answering a question for themselves, or are they going to take that answer and communicate it to other people? Do they need evidence to back up the decision that they are making? How can you arm them so that they are confidently making a decision or answering a question, and give them what they need so that they can stand by that, maybe when they're challenged about it in the next meeting they go to? So who is asking the question? What question do they need to answer? Is it the same question every time? So it's very different if you create a dashboard which is going to be used by maybe 1,000 people, but they're only going to go and visit it once because you've got a one-time process that's taking place and you need to make sure everyone kind of logs in and makes the right decision. That's very different from having a small team of people who are going to look at a particular dashboard on a daily basis. I mean, for a start, when you have that familiarity and the repetition, people very quickly start to see past, they don't need the signifiers that tell you click here for help information, or, there's a filter available here, or if you hover over here, it will highlight, because they become familiar with that. And they just straight away, when they see the dashboard, they understand how to use it and get the answers that they need from it. So maybe you can reduce some of the clutter on the screen for those regular users by just giving them the kind of minimalist version of the content so that they can see and use exactly what they need. One last point I would add there as well is, what is the lifespan of the dashboard? I think it's very easy to fall into a trap almost of imagining that the dashboard is going to last forever. It's perfect, it's solving this problem, data is going to continue to be uploaded in the background. And actually, it's helpful to, I think, even at the outset, have a vision in mind. This dashboard might be effective for the next year while we're going through this particular transformation, or whilst there's this focus on a certain project. But actually, probably in a year's time, when we move away from that other system, or when our priorities have changed, the dashboard might need to be decommissioned, or it might need to change. So I think it's useful to plan for that in advance and have that expectation up front. I'm going to be using this dashboard for, and which audience is it going to be right for? Now, there's one organization that I think really set a high standard with some of these things. And this particularly relates back to the point I was making a moment or two ago about adapting your content. You know, the example I used was with the absolute numbers on the KPIs or the percentage change. So in a KPI context, when you've got those big numbers across the top of the screen, as they often are, I think adding the context there is really important. And actually, I think if you go and speak to people and say, okay, well, how do you use this? What does this number tell you? They'll say, okay, well, that number is important because I'm comparing it with the same number at the start of the year, and the difference tells me X, Y, or Z. So often what people are doing is they're taking some of the information from the dashboard, but they're adding something in, or they are adapting it and changing it. And it's a slightly more nuanced, more complex comparison or something that they're using in their decision-making process. And there's an opportunity there for you as a dashboard creator to say, well, why don't I build that into the dashboard? So the point I'm making with these economist examples here is they do a very, very good job, I think, of getting really to the heart of the matter. What's the real issue? What's the comparison where the interesting story is? So both of these examples, they could have, using exactly the same data, represented the information just really with quite simple bar charts or something. But instead, what they've done is they've said, well, the interesting point here actually is in the kind of the distribution and the, you know, that comparison with the United States, you know, which is, you know, where the sort of the Big Mac index sort of pivots around that. And it opens up then a bit more of an interesting kind of view on this and a bit more of an interesting conversation. The one on the right is similar. You know, they've actually crammed a lot of information on there. One little detail, which I think is slightly lost in this, is the, let's see if I can, does that show? It does, yeah. So this little indication here shows that's a kind of broken line. So actually these numbers extend off to the screen because in Britain we've got such a large spread against this metric. Now I think that's slightly lost in the way they've chosen to represent this, but nevertheless it's still quite a powerful graphic, and they've obviously kind of iterated around on this and said there's a story here we want to tell. What's the best way to bring it to life? You know, in terms of asking someone to remember a point or make a decision or answer a question, let's present the information in a way that really makes that jump out for them. So I always recommend The Economist as being a really good standard in terms of visualizing data and telling a story when they do it. So my last point I would make, I think it's important that everyone finds a process that works for them and for their organization. You can see here, I think that iteration is key. You've got to bring people with you, and you've got to plan and expect to go round in a cycle on these things. The data is key. The wireframe can be part of that, absolutely. And I think there is real value in wireframing. I just think that you need to make sure you are sort of checking and stopping from falling into some of the pitfalls that can happen where you've got a predefined vision of how something must look. Because actually, the interesting part of the story and the real insights might well be hidden in the data. And you need to explore that before you set on a fixed design for how things might look there. So hopefully I tried to bring it all together in one image here, but you've got the data and the wireframe and all the people in that iterative process. And I think it's important that you agree as a team a process that's going to work for you and your organization, and hopefully the process will allow that flexibility and creativity as well. So our last point there. So maybe I think actually there's some common ground for people if they can find a way to work together on this. All right, so that was all I had for you today. I do have a little another minute or so if anyone's got a question right now. Otherwise, I will be available later on for the breakouts and things like that if it's more appropriate for a question to wait till then.
Thanks very much, Alex. We will take a few quick questions because I think there's been quite a few questions on the chat for sure. I'm going to let Charlotte just filter through those and pull out some of the quick ones. But in the room, has anybody got any dying questions that you'd like to ask? There is a microphone just on that seat there. Thank you, Charlotte. Six.
Hello.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for that. I had a quick question about, so if you keep iterating, and I see the value in everything, and it's just like because we have finite resources, including staff resources, staff time. When do you know when to stop? And do you have, like, in your work, do you have a sign-off process where you say to stakeholders, okay, let's sign off this dashboard for now and then revisit, or like you schedule maybe revisit times where you say, okay, has the business need change? Does it need changes? Really curious about that process because we haven't got it currently. So any good tips would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. I think there are going to be several factors at play here. So internally, we use Tableau very much in that self-service setting. I just wonder if I stop sharing my screen, I don't know if that'll, yeah, I don't know if you can see me now or not, but anyway. And, you know, I think we're encouraged to try things and share it with the team and get some value, get some feedback at quite an early point in the development cycle. So it doesn't have to be the full polished article before it gets shared out, you know, very widely. And I think there's a potential trap, which is that, you know, people feel like something has to be perfect before they're going to let anyone else see it. And actually it can mean that things get very much delayed before they get released to a wider audience. I think sometimes there's value in saying, look, we feel like this is 80% ready. We'd like to release it. We'll call it version 1 or, you know, draft release or something, but we want to start getting feedback on it early. And I think that's a good option to consider. The other factor is, you know, it depends on the content. So maybe the Q&A side of things may need to focus as much on ensuring sensitive data is protected and some of the kind of governance aspects, as well as the user experience and the question of does it actually do the job it's intended to do. So you've got those other factors to address as well. But so long as you are not, you know, risking anything that has a data governance concern, I mean, I would encourage people to you know, try and share their work relatively early and say, look, we're going to iterate on this and we'll go from draft to version 1 in the coming weeks, but it's now available for you to give us some feedback. But, you know, I appreciate as well, every organization is different, and in some organizations it's very hard to change the thinking of some people who may not, you know, they may not have the same willingness as you to work in that way.
Thanks, Alex. Does that help answer your question a little bit? Not at all. She's still lost for words, but that's okay because we're here with a theme in mind, and I'm sure Sarah and Rohit will also be willing and able to apply some advice there. My simple advice is I don't use version 1 for my first release. I use version 0.1 because everybody knows that's not the final product, but you can still get it out as quickly as possible then to people because it's their feedback, which is the most important, in fact. So getting it used as soon as possible. Yes, you need to iterate, but that can happen in parallel to that feedback process as well. Charlotte.
Yeah, so there was lots of chatter going on during that in the comment section. A lot of people advocating for the pen and paper approach, saying that, you know, the computer screen just fries the creativity a bit. But there was also some questions about what sort of tools we use for wireframing. And Rowan came in and suggested that him and his team, they use Figma or FigJam. There's people that use PowerPoint. There's people that use Excel maybe. I sometimes just throw data in Tableau and have a play around with it. Have you got any ideas, Alex, about different tools you can use to create your wireframes?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I mean, as you saw, I just went pen and paper when I was thinking about having an example, and I found myself as I was preparing for this presentation, and when I was working on the dashboards there, I mean, I think I'm very confident in Tableau, and I know some people can find this area a bit frustrating, but using the containers to give you the screen layout that you want to have. I remember when I first started using Tableau, I found that area was tricky, but now I've got some tricks and things, and I'm confident that I can lay the screen out exactly as I want. So I would probably say I would go straight into Tableau and start my kind of layout modeling. And it's one of the things I like about that is very easy to copy and paste. You kind of go, okay, well, I like that one. Let's just try it if I had more of a kind of, a vertical split rather than a horizontal split or whatever. You can very easily kind of build up a series of, 4 or 5 different variations of the same thing. And they're all right there. But I think the key to that is having that confidence in terms of the way containers work.
Okay, thanks very much, Alex. Appreciate that. Quick round of applause, everybody, especially those people watching virtually.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Alex. And I don't know whether we're going to be able to squeeze you into the virtual rooms. If we can, we'll definitely get you in there. Okay.
I'll stay on anyway.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Alex. Appreciate that. Next up, we have Sarah. Sarah will introduce herself, but thank you very much for coming along, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
While we're waiting, hi everyone, I'm Sarah Bartlett. I think there's going to be a lot of crossover between our talks today, and I'm sure Rohit's probably thinking the same, because I do touch on some of the topics that I think my slides have gone wrong with formatting. Yeah, okay. All right, no worries. Can we go back? Yeah, thank you. Okay, yeah, so I'm Sarah Bartlett. So I'm a director of BI enablement at JLL. I'm a 5-time Tableau visionary and 6-time Tableau public ambassador. So I do a lot of stuff with Tableau outside of work as well as inside of work. I'm the co-leader of the London Tableau user group. Hands up if you've ever been. Amazing. Okay, cool. So we meet every couple of months. We had a meeting this Monday, actually. And so if you are interested in Tableau and you're in London, please come along. It's a industry agnostic session. So we would welcome speakers from the healthcare industry as well. And I'm also the founder of the IronQuest project. So that's based upon the IronViz feeder process. So if you've ever thought about entering IronViz, IronQuest is a good way to prepare for that. Outside of work, I like to travel. So these are a selection of the places I've been in the last year. So at the top left, you've got Iceland, Tromsø in Norway, LA, Norway again. I was here with my friend Emily in Stockholm. This is also in Norway. This is Trolltunga. This is Rotterdam, and this is Lisbon. So that's at some point I'm going to visualize all of this data. I've done a lot of hiking in Norway. You should probably tell I was there a couple of weeks ago as well on a horrendous hike, which I can tell you about in the break. But yeah, that's something I'd love to do outside of work, and I'm looking at ways I can bring those two loves together, so data and traveling. So I want you to raise your hand if you design dashboards in your job, or if you've ever designed dashboards in your job. Pretty much everyone. Okay. So if you don't design dashboards, I'm assuming that you use dashboards in your role, or you have at some point. If you've ever created a dashboard, I think Alex touched on this, you'll know that it's much easier to create a dashboard for yourself than for someone else. And I know we were talking in the lunch break about how you've got some data, the lady in the audience, about your daughter, and data on like baby feeds and things like that. And it's really easy to pull something like that together, maybe put it on Tableau Public, because you know that data inside out. It's really just for you. It's much more different if you're doing something for someone else. You don't know necessarily what their level of knowledge is about the data. You don't know if they're data fluent, if they're going to understand what you're presenting to them. You don't know what their likes and dislikes are. So there's a lot more challenges that come into play. So I want you to have a think about a dashboard that you've created for somebody else. I'm going to ask you, okay, my slides have gone wrong again. The formatting's not there, but I'm going to ask you how they thought. In here it says, how did they feel? You just can't see it because it should be a white background. So did they feel, now again, I've lost the text, so I had things underneath each of these, but did they feel empowered? I haven't got the word. So these things represent different emotions. I'm sorry it's not there because it should be a white background. I'm worried that this is going to come up again and again. Yeah. Sorry about this.
So Sarah, what about your traveling? Where do you want to go to next?
So next will be a summer holiday. So I don't personally like hot climates, so you can probably tell I've been to a lot of cold countries. I tend to go north, but probably maybe Greece, Cyprus, or somewhere down like on the coast there.
That sounds lovely. I'm so jealous of your traveling. I want to do so much.
Like most of those trips are very short and quick.
I know. I saw some of your Instagram posts from Norway, and I was like, oh, I want to go there.
My last Norway trip was not fun.
Oh dear.
No.
Do we have any keen travelers in the audience that could give us some ideas of where we'd like to go? I personally am dying to go to Cambodia and Vietnam.
Yeah.
I know that's going to be like a really hot climate. I'm the same. Don't do well in the warm, but would really, really like to go there.
I used to have a friend that lived there. It was amazing.
Yeah. Anyone else been to cool places? In Vietnam and Cambodia? Anywhere? Oh, okay. So yeah, we've got Wilf here. He went to Argentina to learn how to tango, which is pretty cool. Reason to go. Yeah. Anybody else had some cool adventures whilst we just, I'm vamping here.
Yeah, I can advertise a small country of Montenegro.
I was looking at Montenegro. So
That's
yes.
Great location. It's very small country. It's tiny.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful everything in the country. So what surprised me that it's have a beautiful seashore, very nice sea.
Yeah.
And at the same time it have a mountains. And even if you can ski, not this winter because it was pretty hot and there was no snow on the slopes, but on the normal winter you can ski there as well. So the distance between sea and skiing, it's about hour and a half.
Okay.
So you rarely find it in any other country.
You're really selling it. So
yeah.
Have to go with it.
Salt, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we are fixed. Okay, so think back to that dashboard that you created for somebody else. How did your users feel when they were working with it? Did they feel empowered, in control, enlightened? Or did they feel confused, frustrated, or even overwhelmed? I really hope nobody felt like this emoji because I wouldn't want that. But ultimately, hang on. Sorry, this is now out of sync. I'm so sorry.
Okay, let's go back to vamping. So Darren has said in the chat that he wants to go to Antarctica, which I have to say is kind of on my list too. Or are we back to?
Yeah, we're back. We can talk travel.
We're back?
Yeah, we're back.
Okay, we're back. Yeah, but Darren, I want to go to Antarctica too to see the penguin.
All right, so so as dashboard designers, we can sometimes fall victim to something called the curse of expertise. Now, Neil Richards, who some of you may be familiar with, he's a colleague of mine, also Tableau visionary. He flagged this to me yesterday. So he attended the Outlier conference last week in Chicago, and somebody was talking about the curse of expertise there when it applies to data viz. And I think this is very relevant to most of us. So we all know things we know. Our clients all know something that they know. And then you have this bit in the middle, like the Venn diagram, where you have what you show your clients and then also what they know. So you're not necessarily showing everything that they know, but we assume that they know everything that we know, right? So it's very easy to assume that that we have the same domain knowledge, that they have the same data fluency level as us. And we even assume things like that they'll be able to interact with a dashboard the way that we would. And I know in my experience working in consulting, I've put dashboards in front of people and they've completely missed the most basic user interaction kind of things that we take for granted. So we often fall trapped to something like this. And in cases like that, your audience, if they don't understand, they're rarely going to ask for clarification. If you think of yourself when you've been in that situation, perhaps you've been talking to somebody who maybe you had an IT issue and you called a help desk at work and they've gone through some terminology maybe you don't understand. Rarely do we say, hey, I don't understand. We just kind of roll along with it and say, yeah, okay. And then we suffer in silence. And quite likely your users have probably been in that situation as well, if they have been presented with something that they don't quite understand. And in the case of a dashboard, if they don't understand what it's presented to them or it's not useful to them, then they ultimately won't use it. And that's not what we want to happen. So in this session, I'm going to share with you some techniques to help you better understand your audience to create dashboards that help your users feel in control and empowered. I'm going to teach you how to apply some of these design techniques. So at the end of the day, your users will have something in front of them that is useful to them, that really helps them elevate their role. And I'm also going to show you how you can better understand your users' needs. So we're going to focus on a lot of concepts from the field of user experience design, so UX design for short. And UX design is about understanding your users' needs. So UX design is a process that design teams use to create products that provide meaningful and relevant experiences to users. Now, this can apply across all industries. It's not just relevant for data visualization, but it focuses heavily on psychology and learning how other people think and giving what they need before they know they need it. And if we think about when we ask users for requirements, quite often they might give you a list of requirements, but it might not be what they actually need because they don't know what they need in most cases. So if you just follow that list of requirements and give them what they asked for, sometimes they'll be like, oh, okay, well, this actually wasn't what I wanted at all. And that's where that disconnect happens. So UX design can really help with that. When applied to dashboards, UX design covers the entire process. So it covers everything from the idea phase, right through to the design, usability, and the functionality of the dashboard. So I'm going to begin by asking you to think about a dashboard that you've used in the past that you love. So this doesn't have to be one that you've created yourself, but a dashboard that you've really enjoyed. And if you can't think of a dashboard, you perhaps think of a website or something like that. And now I want you to think about why you liked it so much. Why did you enjoy the experience of using it? And when we think about things like that, it can be difficult to call out what we liked because quite often the things that we like don't come to mind because it just works as we'd expect it to work. And that's what good design looks like. And that's really what we want to achieve when it comes to dashboards. So if we go and have a look at an example of a dashboard, this dashboard here is by a good friend of mine, Zainab Aidemeji. So Zainab runs the London Tableau user group with me. She's also a Tableau Public ambassador. She has an amazing Tableau Public profile, so I'd encourage you to go and check that out. This is one of her Tableau Public vizzes that she created for a project called Real World Fake Data, or RWFD for short. So this is fake data on a fake fictitious call center. Now, when we look at this dashboard, it allows users to compare performance across days and months up here. And it also shows trends over time and allows users to quickly see significant changes in key metrics in the middle. Now, I know this is a fictitious example, but if I was to think about a call center, I think this dashboard, would be quite useful for those people managing the center. So when we think about what goes into designing a successful dashboard, we become so fixated on the visual presentation. We get very hung up on things like colors and placements and reference lines and things like that. And sometimes we forget what's perhaps more important around what our users need, the requirements and things like this. So there's much more to designing a dashboard than meets the eye. And this is why I have this kind of iceberg reference here. So we have the surface visual design, and that's the things that people see. So like here we've got the reference lines, the bands, if you like. And if we go a level below that, we also do see the structure. That's the overall placement of items on the page and the wireframe, kind of like what Alex was referring to. Next, we have the user flow. So this is where we figure out how our users will be interacting with the dashboard. For example, what action happens when a user clicks something or hovers over a mark. Does a tooltip appear? Then going a level deeper, this layer is all about scope. So this is deciding what requirements make it into the dashboard. So our users might say, hey, we want these things, but maybe we take some things out of those requirements because they aren't feasible. And then finally, we have the strategy. So this is around where we identify who our users are, what problems they're trying to solve, and what the potential business value of the dashboard is. And then more often than not, we place too much emphasis on these top layers and not enough emphasis on these bottom layers. And as a result, we end up with a dashboard that looks good on the surface, but doesn't really meet our users' needs. And as a result, it's unlikely to be adopted or achieve its goals. In reality, all of these layers need to work together in harmony to create a good user experience. And when creating a dashboard, it'd be helpful to follow a design process to help you guide your thinking through each stage, starting at the bottom of the iceberg and working your way back up. So here I have a design process, and I'm going to work you through different tools that you can use at each step of this process while you're designing a dashboard. This helps guide our thinking and helps all of those layers of the iceberg work together. So it starts off with the discover phase. So this is where we look at discovering who our users are and what do they need to do. It then moves on to the distill phase. And this distill phase looks at distilling that information we found in Discover, looking for patterns in our research and determining what the dashboard should accomplish. Then next we move on to ideate. So this is where we look at finding creative solutions, actually creating the dashboard and figuring out how we can set up our users for success. And then finally, we move on to the validate phase. So this is where we actually put something in front of our users, validate if it works, and look for areas where we can improve. So the first two phases of this process are really designed to strengthen those bottom layers of the iceberg. So the strategy, the purpose, the users. And then the top two are designed to tie everything together so that we wouldn't get to the real design until we get to those last two stages of this process. So during this talk, I have a section on each part of the process, and I'll share with you some techniques that you can apply to your work. So let's start with the discover phase. At this stage, this is the very beginning phase. We'll look to identify our users, understand their needs, and start gathering requirements. The goal of this phase is to better understand who our users are and what they need. I want you to remember that you are not the user. And I know we keep coming back to this, but it's so easy to get into your head and think about designing for yourself. You really need to, throughout this process, to put yourself in your user's shoes. They're going to have different ideas and preferences to you, and that's perfectly normal. Just something to bear in mind. So the first thing we tend to do when we're going through this process is do a process of requirements gathering. And I know Alex touched on this as well, so you'll probably see some crossover. But ultimately, in this process, we want to find out who is going to be using the dashboard. We want to understand what they're trying to monitor or understand. The most important, in my opinion, is what action are they going to take with this? So once I've presented all this information to them, what are they then going to do next? Quite often, your users won't be able to answer that question. So it's a good question to ask, because sometimes people like to request dashboards, I feel like, for the sake of requesting dashboards. So it's always good to ask them this question. You want to understand how often they will use the dashboard. So will they be using it every day, every week, every month, once a year? Like, that's going to have a big impact on what you design, because if they're only going to be looking at it once or twice a year, they're going to forget how to use it versus every day. You want to understand how they're going to access it. So I know Alex touched on this as well, but are they going to be using a laptop, a desktop, a phone? Is it going to be presented on a screen that's on the wall in the office? Like, all of these are going to impact your design. And you want to understand how familiar they are with data or data visualization in general. So you don't want to overwhelm them with charts they're not going to understand. So you're not going to put like a Sankey diagram in front of someone who's never used a dashboard before. Now, whilst completing this process, it's really important to question the obvious. You know, there may be things that you think, oh yeah, they're going to be okay. They're going to understand this, and they might not. So if there is anything that comes up that seems really obvious to you, still ask that question. It just really helps to set your assumptions aside and engage with our users better. A technique that can help you do this is the 5 whys. So the 5 whys is an iterative, interrogative technique that helps you, well, it involves you asking why, literally 5 times, as you may imagine. And the reason why we do this is to get to the root of what our users are asking for. It also helps us to break any assumptions that we might have about our users and their needs. So let's work through an example of asking through the 5 whys. So let's imagine a stakeholder has approached us and asked for a new dashboard. So we would start by asking the first why. And they say, they want to monitor the impact of an online training course they're running internally. Okay, so we ask why again. And they say to understand if employees are completing the course. So it makes sense. They want to understand like the number of people completing it. We ask why again, and they say to see which teams have completed the course and where we need to push. So this is new information here that we didn't get at the beginning phase. We could have gone away and built the dashboard off the first why, but there's extra information here that may impact our design. And we ask why again, and they say to show leadership how well we are doing across the organization. So this is bringing in a new audience group that we didn't get at the beginning. So again, this may impact our design. And then finally, we ask why again, and they say to show so leadership can take action to encourage more enrollments where needed. So this is really the outcome, that the action they're going to take, which they didn't mention at the beginning. So you can see that the two, if we've got the first why and the last why, those things are very, very far apart. And this is why we need to challenge those assumptions and really delve into what our users need and ask them time and time again until we actually get there. And this process can help with that. So at the end of the discovery phase, we want to have identified who our users will be and what do we know about them. We want to have asked identified some business value questions, which tend to be aligned to business goals. So this could be something like, are we on track to meet our quarterly targets? And that's something that we could look to answer through our dashboard. We want to define the so what, so the potential business impact of this dashboard. We want to seek to understand any current challenges. So maybe there is a dashboard at the moment that nobody uses. So why is that? We want to delve more into that to understand what the current challenges are so we can help address them. And finally, we want to understand what action the dashboard will enable our users to take. And I'll keep coming back to this because it's my favorite thing. I think it's very, very important. Now, common mistakes in this process is where we're not emphasizing with our users enough. So we're just really not maybe listening to them or not getting to the crux of what they need. We may be answering questions that nobody asked. This is where we maybe designed something that we think we know what we're doing and just end up kind of going off piste and designing something completely different. We might be trying to do all the things for all the people. So this is where we have maybe multiple audience types or personas, as I'm going to get to in a minute. And we try and design a dashboard that meets all of their needs. And ultimately what happens is we end up with a dashboard that does nothing for anyone and doesn't get used. We could be overwhelming users with too much info. So this is where we pile too much information onto a dashboard and again, try and get it to do too much. We could be assuming that our users are familiar with data or are data fluent. And again, if they're not, or they're not at the level that we think they are, they may be overwhelmed. And we may not be providing extra context for data. So I know Alex touched on this with his bands, but he had some big numbers up the top there with some context underneath. And context is really important with what we're designing so we can understand those numbers better. So once we've completed the discover phase, we move on to distill. So this is the second stage in our process. And in this stage, we want to define our strategic vision and goals and start looking at user personas. We'll have a lot of information we gathered in Discover. And this is where we can really distill that information down. So at the end of the distill phase, we will have all this information. We can put together a strategic vision for our dashboard. And this is really helpful because it's something you can refer back to later. I appreciate this is a luxury, and you probably wouldn't do this for every dashboard you design, but some of these things will help you track ROI and really just see if you're staying on track and also keep people accountable as well. So in the strategic vision, you want to define your goals. So what are the goals of the dashboard? What is the business value and impact it's going to deliver? You want to define the desired outcomes, so the measures of success and the actions needed to drive those outcomes. And this really helps you stay true to your overall goals. You want to define the people. So this is both the audience and their goals and challenges, but also the people that are involved on the project. So I know when I worked in consulting in the past, we were reliant on people, maybe data engineers, to pull the data in. And sometimes we'd be on these projects and then you'd overlook these people. And then suddenly when you needed them, they'd be off on holiday. So it's really important that you define all the people in this process and what their roles are. Timelines are really important. So what's going to be delivered and when, so you hold yourself to account to that and hold other team members to account. Again, timeline's important when you're thinking about who's going to be available and when. And also data sources. I mean, data's kind of the crux of all of this, but it's important that you understand what your data sources are and you be able to access that data. Also understand what state the data is in. Does it need extra work to clean it up? And once you've got that strategic vision, we can move on to user personas. Hands up if you're familiar with user personas or have ever done a persona exercise. Okay, amazing. So based on what we know from our users from the discovery phase, we can start to build out these user personas. Personas are fictional characters based upon your research to represent different user types that might use your dashboard. They really help us to emphasize our users and understand their unique needs, experiences, beliefs, and goals. And based on our research, we want to look for common goals and challenges across our user base. Now, personas really help us to walk in our users' shoes. So again, it's helping to emphasize with the user and understand things from their perspective. When you're pulling together personas, it's very easy to kind of group different job types together. So you might say, okay, all managers are going to be this persona. All supervisors are going to be this persona. But sometimes you might find that there's regional differences. So maybe the managers in the north have a different challenge to the managers in the south, or maybe they have different objectives. So there's things like that are important to bear in mind. Ideally, what you want to create a unique dashboard experience per persona. But that doesn't mean to say they each need a different dashboard. They could all use the same dashboard, and you may be able to help them with things like filters. But sometimes you are going to ultimately have to design different dashboards for different users if their needs are that vastly different. And you want to refine your personas through research. So I know we did the research in the discover phase, but ideally, when you're building out these personas, if you have the time, I know time's a luxury, you really want to kind of verify what you've found in your research to make sure it's accurate. And the personas don't have to be just applied to data visualization, like they can be applied for lots of many things. In the previous role, we built up personas to understand our internal user base, to understand their data literacy levels, to understand their skills when it came to things like data engineering. And that was really helpful when we were working on building out a business case for different tools. The persona can come together in a template like this one. So this is something I've used in the past. So this helps we tend to give each of our personas a fictional name. So this could be like, I don't know, Dave, for instance, with a job title, and then that could be representative of that group. You can include in here real quotes, so things that you've heard your users say to really bring that to life. You want to include their background, so a little bit about them, their role, number of years experience they may have, their core needs, so what do they want to achieve in their job, their motivations and their targets, their preferences, so when it comes to data consumption, do they really love tables or are they more comfortable with charts? How frequently they're going to consume things, so whether that be weekly, monthly, quarterly. Their method of consumption, so is it an executive who swears by using their phone, or is it somebody who's only ever going to use a laptop? Their pain points, so barriers or issues to adoption. So, is this something that's going to absolutely point blank stop them from using a dashboard that you create? And any frustrations with the current state. So what's already been tried? Have they got a dashboard already that this group just don't use for whatever reason? If there is, note that down. You can come back to it later. Now, this is an example as well of something you could do for a persona exercise. So this is something that I stole from Adam McCann. He has a fantastic blog post on this that you can find online. But if we think about our personas on this spectrum, if we think about an executive persona, so the executive, in terms of the familiarity of data, probably won't be that familiar, right? They're just going to be presented something. They're not going to have an intimate knowledge of that data. In terms of frequency of looking at a dashboard, they're probably going to be looking at maybe every day, every week, not every hour, right? They just don't have the time for that. And then comes down to the amount of time they have, then the amount of time they'll spend with the dashboard, it's going to be very little. They need to get in there, find those insights, and then move on to something else. But when it comes to the outcome, they're very much more, they're going to be the decision makers. They're going to be the ones that need to get that insight and make a decision. They're not going to be, their outcome isn't going to be insight. They don't want to get all these insights to go and explore them because they simply don't have the time. And then that ties into the last point in terms of detail. Based upon everything we know already, they're going to need something that's quite simplistic so they can just quickly get in there and get what they need and move on. Now, we compare this to an analyst persona. They're going to be probably very intimate and familiar with the data. They're probably working with it inside out every day. They're going to spend a lot of time with it. They have more time. That's probably more focus of their role. they're going to be much more, in terms of outcome, they're going to be very much more on the insight side. So they're going to be the ones finding the insights and telling the executives, but they're not going to be making the decisions. And as a result of all of this, they want something that's quite complex. They want to be able to delve in, do some more like exploratory analysis and that kind of thing. So you can see the difference between the two. Very different, I can't go back, very different experiences between those two personas. So this is something you can actually put into your persona board as well. So now we've gathered all this information, we want to move on to the ideate phase. This is where we look at finding inspiration and wireframing. And I know that Alex touched on a lot of wireframing, which is really helpful for me when I don't have to introduce it at all. But you've gathered all this information for those two phases. The focus of this stage is really just getting that down on paper, finding out kind of what's important, what's not, and prioritizing what you're going to focus on. You could start sketching out ideas and then comparing them back to your goals. And that's why that strategic vision is really important, so you can make sure you're staying on track. And we want to get some inspiration at this stage as well. So maybe you could go on to something like Tableau Public to have a look at what's already out there to get some inspiration before you start wireframing. So there's plenty, thousands of executive dashboards on there that you can take inspiration from. Some of them are also split by industry, so you can have a look at specifically healthcare dashboards. You could also look at something like Dribble, which is more of a design, kind of UX designer kind of site, but it also has some interesting designs, and you could get some inspiration for things like filter design, user navigation panes, and that kind of thing. Once you've solidified your ideas, you can move on to wireframing. So I don't need to tell you what a wireframe is because Alex went through that in plenty of detail. But there's two types of wireframes that we can have. So there's the lo-fi wireframe. So this is typically something like a pen and paper, like what Alex presented. But you also have hi-fi wireframes. So these could be interactive experiences that feel like you're in Tableau or any data visualization tool, when in fact you're actually in a wireframing tool. So we typically start with the lo-fi wireframe and then move on to something more hi-fi once we've got our ideas solidified a little bit more. And I think this answers a question that we had, Charlotte, in the chat around wireframing tools. I actually have a slide on this. So there's some of my favorite ones here. So we've got Miro, Figma, PowerPoint, and Mockup AI. They're all very different. So Miro is great. If any, and hands up if you've used Miro before. Okay, perfect. So Miro is good because if you want to just put an image in there and then give people the ability to add sticky notes with feedback on top of that image, it's really helpful. It's not interactive though, so you wouldn't be able to do an interactive hi-fi wireframe in there. At least I don't think you can. Maybe you can. With Figma and FigJam, okay, you can. Brilliant. With Figma and FigJam, you certainly you can create those interactive experiences. That's something I've done before in a project. We've had users work with wireframes in Figma thinking they were in Tableau because they were that good. So you can actually, define where you're going to click and then move to the next screen, for instance, and define each of those actions, which is really, really useful. But you can also use it for a more basic wireframe as well. PowerPoint's good if you want to do something that's really quick and easy. I know some people are more comfortable with using PowerPoint. And then Mockup AI is it's kind of similar to Figma in some ways. There's plugins you can use for Figma. So there's one by a guy called Robert Janovic, which is the Tableau UI kit. There's also one by Tristan Gullivan. So he's got a website called La Data Viz. He also has a plugin that you can use for wireframes in Figma. So both those tools are great. And those tools include components. So you could pull out bar charts, line charts, and common components you'll have on your dashboard, and then place them quickly in a wireframe to save you drawing them, which you'll probably have to do in PowerPoint. I did find a tool that you can use for PowerPoint. Actually, on the Flourish Twins blog, they have a guest post of a lady that has a tool you can download for free. There's an example of it there you can use for wireframing in PowerPoint. And those things just really save time. Otherwise, you're there like drawing your little bars on your wireframe, which is not where you want to spend your time. Mockup AI has those components as well. So it's just a case of dragging them over and dropping them. But these are all really good tools. Figma, just like Miro, you can add elements in there where you can provide feedback. So you can have sticky notes so people can actually say once they've interacted, oh, I didn't really understand this, or how would I use this, for instance. But these really bring your ideas to life. So once you've done that paper wireframe, you can refine it through something more hi-fi before you get into Tableau. I know that once we start designing in Tableau, we become so attached to what we've designed. We don't want to throw those worksheets away because we've spent time on them. That's why it's important, at the wireframing phase to really narrow down that design. So once we're fully sure what everyone wants, we can then move to designing it in Tableau, and it's much quicker because we haven't got to make those decisions like what color should this be? Where should this be? Should I have these grid lines on? Because we would have covered all those questions off at the wireframing phase. Now, finally, we move on to the validate phase. So this is where we gather some lightweight feedback and then start testing our designs. Now, we could, after wireframing, go and design in Tableau, or we could continue with our wireframes and move on to validate. It's really up to you and how much time you have. But what we want to do in this phase is really put something in front of our users and get their feedback. Now, with lightweight feedback, this feedback could come from your stakeholders, but it could also come from other people on your project. So maybe you've designed something, you want to run it past a colleague to make sure you've not missed anything before you put it in front of your stakeholder. As an example, I've had Zainab's dashboard again, and I've just added in some like red text of what this could look like. So it could be that I've designed this and I've missed out a couple of things, and my colleague is like, oh, hey, you missed out that feedback button, or you forgot to add the targets in. So it's very easy for me just to get that feedback, add it in, fix it before I present it to anybody else. And then once the dashboard's ready, we can move on to something called user testing, or what I like to call user labs. This is where we actually put a design in front of a user. This will be either a hi-fi wireframe or Tableau, and ask them to interact with it. So in user labs, they will go through a series of questions or scenarios. So for instance, it could be answering questions like, what was my sales value in December, and making sure that they can get to the right number. It could also be asking them, how would I then navigate to this page and maybe download the data to a table? And just making sure that they're able to interact with these things. Now, I've done this at work before, and it's been quite eye-opening to put something in front of somebody, something that I thought was intuitive, and they've been completely stuck and they've not been able to work through those scenarios. So this is where, if you have the time, I would say really spend the time sitting with your users and watching them work through your designs. Ideally, you want to watch real users in a test environment. This can be done in person or virtually. I've done it both, and both have worked fine. But it's best to work on a one-to-one basis, because people don't want to feel embarrassed if they can't do something, and that can happen in a group setting. As I mentioned, give users a series of tasks or questions and ask them to think aloud. So as they're clicking through, they're going to be saying, okay, so I'm going to click here because I want to see this. And that's really insightful. When I worked on a project doing this before, I had a colleague who was a UX designer. And what he did was he actually wrote down anything they said out loud and documented it as positive or negative. So the general sentiment of what they were saying. So were they sensing any frustration about something like, oh, where are my filters? And if that was the case, then we wrote that down as a negative, and it was something that we could address later. But it wasn't necessarily something they told us was wrong, but it's something they kind of said subconsciously. So once you've done all that, you might be wondering, I think you had the question, when are we finished? And it's a good question, because we could keep going on and on and on and doing this forever. I like to think of dashboards as never finished, because they're live documents that constantly evolve. But I'd say when you get to a point where you're comfortable and your users are comfortable, I would say then at that point you can ship the dashboard, and then you can come back to some of these tools later. So maybe you're not getting the adoption you expected, and that's where you can leverage some of these tools again. Now, to recap, I know I've gone through a lot in this presentation. We started off here with the iceberg, and we said that we're spending too much emphasis on the surface design of our dashboards and not enough on the strategy, scope, and vision. We went through the design process, so the discover, distill, ideate, and validate. This is where we kind of discover more about our users before putting solutions into place. Now, it's important to note that this process is iterative, so you don't have to go through in a linear fashion. If you've got current dashboards, for instance, that you want to try some of these techniques with, you could go straight to validate and do some user lab testing, and then go back to maybe discover, and maybe you do some personas based on that research. You don't have to flow through this in order. You can also skip phases as well if you need to. In terms of where to start, I would say start small. Don't try and do everything at once. Perhaps just pick a dashboard that you know already exists, that's not getting the traction that it should be. And you could start using some of that techniques on that dashboard. You could also start with a brand new project as well, but you're more inclined to you could pick out some of these things easier on a current dashboard and work from there. Like I said, validate current dashboards. Look for quick wins. So look where there's obvious things where you know there's a problem. Maybe you know that you're not hitting some users for certain dashboards, and you can start maybe doing some persona analysis about them, finding out more about them to understand why it is they're not using those dashboards. Look to design repeatable processes as well. So I've got some templates there, like the persona template. You can use that again and again and again. Same with the wireframes, you could perhaps create some templates, and that just makes the whole process easier. And some additional resources for you. So these are books focused on both dashboard design and UX design. Some of my favorites are the Big Book of Dashboards. If anyone's familiar with that, it's essentially a big book of about 20 dashboards, but it's really good for some inspiration of dashboard design from different industries and why those designs work. Don't Make Me Think is great. It's more focused on web design, but it gives you an idea of user experience and some of the concepts we've covered today. So thank you for everyone for listening. I hope that was useful. If you want to reach out to me, I'm pretty much online everywhere, Sarah Loves Data, or you can look at my blog, sarahlovesdata.co.uk.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Are you okay to take some questions?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we'll go online in a moment with Charlotte, but before we go to questions here, I know you felt there was a lot of crossover with Alex, but I guarantee these people saw a lot less crossover than you did because you're not the user.
It's true.
Okay, but I thought it was really good. And so thank you very much. Online first, maybe?
No specific questions. We were just having some conversations about Figma. A question about the difference between Figma and FigJam, which I think I answered, but we'll just double check with Sarah, see if she knows.
I think FigJam's more like
It's
Miro.
more, yeah,
with the sticky
FigJam,
notes.
both by the company Figma, but FigJam is more like something you can jam with other people kind of thing. It's more collaborative.
It's like a whiteboard.
Yeah,
with the sticky notes. Yeah.
And I just also noted in the chat, so I'll note it to you guys too, is at Tableau conference, there was a Figma Tableau plugin announced.
Yes.
That's
so Tristan Gillivan. So La Dataviz, so ladataviz.com. You'll find tons of amazing stuff on his website. So I'd recommend checking it out.
Thanks very much. Why not take mine? Here you go.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. My name is Nick. Thank you for the presentation. Coming back to Alex's presentation, so what questions on value of this data would you ask if you look at the data about the dentist? So because the presentation is good, so insight was found, but what decision maker would ask this dashboard or this data to make a decision based on?
So what? Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Yeah. So Alex presented the data about dentists. Yeah, and what can be executive questions to this data? Because we're talking a lot about getting value out of dashboards and out of data. So what can be this question to the Alex data about dentist from the previous conversation?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to that. I had a point in there around business value questions. So my example was, are we on track to meet our quarterly targets?
Mm-hmm.
So then we could then look at presenting the data in a way that told us if we're on track or not. So it's how we take that kind of those objectives and those business goals and then use the data to determine to monitor those things and determine if there's any action that we need to take. So that's the way that I look at that.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks, Wilf. Yeah, I think one other observation in terms of you talked about different users and different use cases.
Yeah.
But the other thing to think about in my head is also that the same user may have a different use case. So say I'm a field representative.
Yeah.
I'm doing my business planning. I want a big dashboard with loads of information because I've got to do a quarterly business plan for the boss. But I'm going to see a customer. I want to pull that customer record up instantly, know all that. And that will sit on my phone, which will be a completely different dashboard from my business planning one. So again, to think about within your personas where and when they're going to use the particular data and information.
Absolutely. So that's almost a level deeper. So it's just like what I'd call a sub-persona. So we have these high-level personas. We know, like, let's say managers, and then we've got specific things that they'll do because they won't all do the same thing and they won't have all the same interests and they won't have all the same skill level as well. So it's where we think about breaking up those personas to a more granular level and thinking about their unique experiences. And that's where it's useful to bring in those people for user testing so we can make sure that we are meeting all of their needs.
Thank you very much. I think it's very common as well, isn't it? People have different roles and therefore they've got different hats and therefore split personas.
Yeah, you have to, I mean, the personas are useful because you can reuse them. So it doesn't mean once you've got the high level ones, you could potentially use them for multiple projects, but you are going to have scenarios where they've got slightly different needs. And I know I was working, a lot of this was inspired by a project I worked on, which was a big HR dashboard. It was the oldest Tableau dashboard at our organization that had been built by somebody who didn't really know how to use Tableau. And they'd had it for about 5 years, and it was a terrible dashboard. And it was a horrible experience. It took about a minute to load. It had about 7 different views, and it was designed for every single manager in the organization to track HR metrics about their teams. But they were also using it for HR business partners who had a kind of a higher level view. So they weren't interested at the individual level, but more the team level. So they were coming in and having a horrible experience with this dashboard because it wasn't designed for them. Then we were expecting executives to look at it, and they had these huge teams that, you know, they just couldn't consume the data at all. So this is where we had to think about, okay, well, where are these sub-personas, and what about people managers who have 1 person on their team versus 50? How do we create unique experiences for each of those without creating 20 different dashboards?
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions? Any more appear online?
No, but can I just say, when I wrap up, and then I just want to do a bit of housekeeping.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So thanks very much, Sarah. Really appreciate that. You're going to be sticking around. So if you've got any more other questions when we're doing the breakout groups, you can ask Sarah a bit more detail then if you want to do that in a smaller environment as well.
Thanks,
So,
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Round of
just-
applause. Yes. Thank you.
Just a bit of housekeeping before we go on. I've realized that I didn't put anyone a break in for this. So, and this is, 3 hours of just sitting around is quite a lot. So we don't have time for a break, but please stand up, stretch, get drinks, take your comfort break as you need it. Nobody will judge you just for giving a bit of it. Nobody cares. All right, then. Thanks.
Excellent. Over to Rohit. So thank you very much, Rohit.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rohit, and I'm a data analyst. I've been a data analyst for about 4 years now. I work for a company called UCL Partners. I've been working there for over 1 year. My Tableau journey actually started with UCL Partners, undertaking Steve's Tableau fast track course. So really good course. Steve is not paying me to say this, but yeah, highly recommend it. So we'll get right in. Who are we at UCL Partners? So we're a health innovation partnership, and our mission is to help 5 million people from North London to the east to Essex coast live longer and healthier lives. Our region include North Central London, which is the purple shaded region on the map, North East London, which is the orange bit, and Mid and South Essex, which is the red bit on the map. So we focus on the biggest health challenges our diverse communities are facing and living with, prioritizing those most people that are in need. We solve these health problems through research and innovation, and we speed up the delivery of solutions that improve health and care. So some of the health challenges include respiratory health, dementia, mental health, cardiovascular health, and so on. First, I thought we could start with an exercise on Slido. So we're looking at Tableau challenges. So some of the challenges I've come across, and some challenges that are quite common amongst the Tableau community, is data preparation and integration, user adoption and training, stakeholder engagement, and maintenance and updates. So I thought if everyone can bring out your phones, and then we could go on to Slido. You could scan the QR code or enter the number at the bottom of slido.com. So just give me 1 moment. Sorry, just 1 moment.
We're going to quickly share it in the call as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I come? Yeah, so then, yeah. Cool. Okay.
Just give me 1 moment. Yep, so we're getting a few words in now. Misinterpretation, low usage. Okay, yeah, that's a common problem that I've been facing as well. Data cleaning, understanding the role need. Missing data, yep, that's a big one in our conflicting interests, how to engage key stakeholders, poor quality data, storytelling, lack of adoption, data quality is coming up a lot. And what is the problem? Needing more agile data products, not just dashboards. Cool. Data quality again. There's a couple more participants typing, and then I'll move on to the next slider.
Did somebody mistype data quality on purpose?
So on this slide, if you could rank these options from the most challenging to least challenging, so we've got data preparation and integration, user adoption and training, stakeholder engagement, and maintenance and updates. So what do you find the most challenging? So data preparation integration, we're talking about integrating data from various sources, which can be quite complex. User adoption and training, this is about the stakeholders may struggle to adopt the dashboard without proper training. Stakeholder engagement, aligning the dashboard design with stakeholder needs, and maintenance and updates, keeping dashboards up to date with ever-changing and new data. So a lot of you are saying stakeholder engagement is the most challenging, followed by data preparation integration, closely followed by user adoption and training, and maintenance and updates. Cool. So it looks like stakeholder engagement is the most challenging amongst most of you, and then maintenance and updates is the least challenging. So regarding stakeholder engagement, one way I sort of manage that challenge is sort of regularly communicating with stakeholders, involving them in the design process, and gathering feedback throughout the whole project. That's quite helps keep up stakeholder engagement. Data preparation and integration is the second most challenging. So with that, I utilize tools such as Power Query and Excel to sort of import, clean, and integrate my data set. I know I've also used R. I know some of you also use R to clean the data before you get that ready to import it into Tableau. And Tableau Prep is also quite popular amongst the Tableau community and amongst some of you guys, I imagine. User adoption and training. So that I have conducted demo sessions and training sessions for stakeholders. That's quite helped, and creating user guides. That's been quite helpful, as well as providing continuous support to make sure that user engagement is there, and how they could effectively use the dashboard. And the maintenance and updates, that's what you found the least challenging. That's essentially just updating the dashboard quite regularly, keeping them up to date with new data, and whilst if there's business change, just keeping that up to date as well. So establishing maybe a maintenance schedule will be quite helpful, and regularly reviewing the dashboard. So yeah, thank you everyone for that exercise. I'll move on to the next slides. Yeah. Okay. Should be on the journey. Right? Should be on the journey. On the next slide. The notes are not mature. Sorry, one moment.
Do we need to talk about our holidays again?
Yeah.
Rohit, where have you been?
A couple months ago, I actually went to Mauritius. Beautiful country, nice tropical island, beautiful people, amazing beaches. So yeah, highly recommend that. Norway is actually on my list, as well as Montenegro. So look forward to going to that probably end of this year, Norway, and Montenegro next summer, hopefully. So yeah.
Yeah, I really want to go to Norway. I want to go to Bergen and do the fjords. I think that would be really beautiful. And I really want to go to Iceland. I have a fascination with volcanoes. So I want to go and experience that. I think we're all ready now.
Oh, thank you. So my journey is about engaging customers from theory to practice. So this journey will begin, we'll provide an example of designing a dashboard with stakeholders from initial engagement all the way up until post-delivery. So we're going to go through initial engagement, and then the dashboard design, if it's whether it's still fit for purpose, the benefits and challenges of staying in touch with your customer post delivery, and as well as the key takeaways. We'll look into that. So initial engagements. So what is the reason why this dashboard was created and why? So firstly, what is MatNeo? So the dashboard was created for maternal and neonatal stakeholder. So the MatNeo encompasses all aspects of healthcare provided to mothers during pregnancy, childbirth, as well as the postpartum period, as well as care provided to newborns, particularly those born preterm or with low birth weights. So there's 4 main aims for this dashboard. One was improving perinatal outcomes. So improving perinatal outcomes, what I mean by this, the primary goal is to improve the health outcomes of both mothers and babies by tracking specific indicators. Healthcare providers can sort of identify what needs most improvement and implement those evidence-based interventions. Secondly, the dashboard was created to sort of look at standardizing care. Standardizing care, or what I mean by that is there's a need to standardize care across all different hospitals and maternity units to ensure that all mothers and babies receive the same optimal care. And benchmarking performance, healthcare systems require benchmarks to measure performance against regional and national standards. This helps in identifying different practices and best practices and areas that require the most attention. And data-driven decision making. So healthcare admins and clinicians need reliable data to make these informed decisions. And a dashboard provides that a sort of vital interactive way to sort of analyze and interpret data more clearly. So why was the dashboard created? This is what the user and stakeholder was receiving before they requested a dashboard. So every month they were receiving a monthly report with about 10 indicators, with 10 of these tables. And yeah, they have found it quite difficult to gather insights from this. As you can see, it's a RAG-rated report. So you got red, amber, green, signaling if they're on track, above the benchmark, or below. So because they'll send this every month, they couldn't gather much insights from it. They wanted to see trends in a more clearer way in the form of a charts. And various charts. Because there's so many different indicators, a dashboard was the best way for the user to look at it. So the 3 main points of why is consolidating monthly reports, number 1. So easy access to historical data and trends, allowing for quicker and more informed decision making. Number 2 is visualizing key metrics. So it's easier to visualize key metrics on a dashboard over a report. So stakeholders can quickly identify periods of improvement or decline and investigate these underlying causes much more quicker. And the 3rd point is enhancing stakeholder engagement. So a dashboard enhances stakeholder engagement, so increases their involvement and accountability, fostering a more collaborative approach to improving perinatal outcomes. So this was sort of the final product, the dashboard, compared in comparison to the reports. So that report has become this dashboard now. So transforming those reports into the interactive Tableau dashboard provided a powerful tool for the stakeholder to track, analyze, and improve perinatal care, ultimately enhancing outcome for mothers and babies. Please note it's also dummy data. The chart also shows the time trend chart across several months. There's filters for local maternity neonatal systems and the hospitals that belong on those LMNS. And there's metrics. There's about 10 different metrics the user could flicker through. So that is a much more efficient way than looking at sort of a standard PDF reports and gathering insights from that. So over here, we've got the metric antenatal magnesium sulfate. So that is given to mothers who give birth less than 30 weeks. That are given 24 hours prior. And there's a 90% benchmark for this indicator. So at least 90% of mothers in these neonatal units should receive antenatal magnesium sulfate. So we can see there's a benchmark at 90% with a fainted dotted line, and the line beneath it is the median, more darker. So the user, the stakeholder, can see much more easily which hospitals, which metrics are above the benchmark, below the benchmark, and you could compare between different hospitals what needs improving. So a stakeholder also said the charts are very useful for looking at the progress for different optimizations and different units, especially compared to the data tables. So designing the dashboard, it consisted of 3 main points. So I had to focus on and emphasize on the user-centric design. What I mean by user-centric design is focusing on the end user experience. So it needs to be design intuitive, easy to navigate, and make sure that it answers the specific business questions. And as well as using interactive elements to enhance that user engagement. So we've got the filterings and picking the options and so on. Effective data visualizations is another key component of dashboard design. So choosing the right sort of visualization for your data. Make sure you understand what you're showing as well. So having that knowledge. So prior to creating the dashboard, I didn't know much about maternal and neonatal data, but upon sort of learning a bit more about it, I was able to have a much more deeper conversation with the stakeholder and understand what type of visuals they're showing and what type of visuals me as a designer and analyst are making for them. So that's really important. Avoiding the clutter as well, and focusing on clarity and using color for an effective and simple dashboard is more effective for a lot of stakeholders. Continuous feedback is very important. So establishing a sort of process for ongoing feedback from users, so regularly reviewing the dashboard's effectiveness and making the necessary adjustments to ensure that it remains relevant and useful at all times. So how do I make sure the dashboard is fit for purpose or it remains fit for purpose? So initially it starts from the actual initial engagement with the stakeholder. So understanding their needs. So the importance of understanding the stakeholder needs and sort of setting those clear objectives is essential for the product to remain fit for purpose. Aligning the dashboard design with those needs and ensuring ongoing engagement can be difficult. So defining clear objectives from the beginning before starting the dashboard design and the wireframing, it's best to sort of ensure you have regular reviews and meetings with the stakeholder to provide actionable insights for that dashboard. Prototyping and early feedback. As Sarah and Alex have mentioned earlier on, sort of regarding the wireframing, that's really important to share with the stakeholder. So sort of developing prototypes and wireframes of the dashboard and present those to the stakeholder for early feedback. This helps in identifying any sort of major design or functionality issues before the final product is or the full scale product is developed. So gathering feedback through regular review sessions and iterating on the design is essential to making sure it's fit for purpose, and regularly communicating with the stakeholders, involving them in the design process too, and gathering feedback. Make sure this product is fit for purpose. So now I'm going to head over to the benefits and challenges of staying in touch. First, we're going to touch on the benefits. So some benefits of staying in touch with the users post-delivery. So one is a continuous improvement. So sort of regular feedback can reveal certain metrics are no longer relevant, leading to updates that sort of keep the dashboard useful. So in my case, one of the indicators on the dashboard drastically had a drop in values for a few months, which made the trend chart look like it's gone outliers. But it was an outlier because we wasn't told that on the reports. Once I fed that back to the stakeholder, they contacted the ODN, which is the Operational Neonatal Data Network, and they said that hospital is not reporting that indicator anymore, and they will let us know in a few months when they will. So keeping that regular contact with the stakeholder and keeping in touch with them makes you sort of understand the product more and sort of why that indicator is looking a bit has outliers now. Another one benefit is user satisfaction and adoption. So offering follow-up training sessions, demos, or addressing user queries quite promptly can enhance their experience and their confidence of using the dashboard. And the third benefit of staying in touch is the increased business value. So regular reviews might help uncover new cases even, or review of indicators and metrics that can be integrated into new designs and a new iteration of the dashboard. Now we're going to look at some challenges. So one challenge that I encountered was a change of teams. So this could be due to extended leave, change of role, ex-secondment, and so on. So one solution that sort of helped me was keeping a knowledge repository. So when new members join, you could just share that knowledge repository. They could be up to date with what the dashboard is and sort of the updates that have been done so far. And then you can meet to discuss any progress, any future updates, and so on. Keeping users engaged is another main challenge. I know some of you have also put that on the Slido, keeping user engaged. So the way I sort of deal with that is with just keeping regular updates and highlighting maybe new features and success stories of others using it in the team or other people using something similar, and providing refresher demo sessions. So they might not know how to use it anymore. So providing that training session, taking out some time and doing that. And another challenge that a lot of Tableau users face is managing diverse feedback on a product. So I haven't really faced this challenge on this project myself, but I have in previous projects. So stakeholders can give various different feedback. So maybe establishing a sort of structured feedback management process can help, sort of categorizing that feedback based on priority and impact. Which then you could communicate transparently with those stakeholders and users about which changes should be implemented and why. So key takeaways, it's not Chinese, but hopefully we get one later today. So a few key takeaways from our session. So understanding indicators is essential for effective dashboard design. So having that knowledge, as I said earlier, sort of enables proactive discussions with the stakeholder. So when designers such as ourselves comprehend the metrics, we can easily translate that data and have meaningful conversations with our stakeholder and create meaningful visualizations that they can easily interpret and use. User-centric design is essential. So going back to sort of wireframing with the stakeholder, engaging with them in the beginning to gather requirements and define clear objectives. So regularly seeking feedback during the development phase is essential to make iterative improvements. This user-centric approach results in dashboards that are intuitive and relevant as well as valuable, and that stay fit for purpose. And then another key takeaway, so continuous engagement post-delivery adds value. So again, I think establishing a feedback loop through regular emails, feedback sessions, and user analytics, that sort of helps keep continuous engagement, and regularly updating the dashboard following the user feedback to address the changing needs will enhance performance. Continuous engagement sort of fosters the user satisfaction and maximizes the impact of the dashboard. Cool. That's all. Thank you for listening. My contact details, my email, and my LinkedIn are there. So happy to connect with all of you and happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Rohit. Really appreciate that. Thank you. I think that was the best presentation, not just because I taught Rohit so many years ago. It's got nothing to do with it whatsoever. Questions from the chat? No questions from the chat. Questions from the room? Yes, lady at the back. Hold on a second. Let me bring the microphone over.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. So you mentioned about the when after you make the dashboard, and then you kind of talk about like the how do you sorry, I haven't articulated my question very well. So when you make the dashboard, we kind of have a focus group to ask like, what is the requirement, what you want? And then in your presentation, kind of mentioned that after a period of time, some of the key users already moved to different team, and also different, and newcomer also coming into the team and things like that. How do you keep in touch with them? How do you make sure that the dashboard have been used? Because for me, my difficulty is, like you said, at the very beginning, we got one group of people that who coming in ask for the request, and then 6 months later or year later they gone, and then new group people coming in. How can I, because they got different focus, how can I, or how you would do that in the situation to do the key engagement content?
Oh yeah, no, good question. Thank you. So in my experience, the dashboard was designed with different stakeholders. The main stakeholder went on leave, changed the roles actually, and then someone else came in, and then they already had a sort of ready-made dashboard, so they were using that, but they wanted to get, they were a bit confused on how to use it, so I ran a demo session with them, and then they did come back with a bit of feedback. So it's about sort of having that feedback and then doing a few changes that they would require. So they wanted to see another new indicator, which was not on the report. They wanted to see a different benchmark for different indicators shown on the graph. So me as an analyst, as a designer, I went back and included that. So it's about just sort of having that continuous sort of feedback with them, and just making those changes as well. It won't be a whole new dashboard because it's already a product that's created for the stakeholders. But if it's a new dashboard, then it will have to be sort of a whole new project. And but it's about sort of having that sort of skill to sort of an experience to iterate that dashboard and change it slightly to the way the new stakeholder would like to see it. So yeah, in my experience, it hasn't taken up much capacity because the sort of main components and foundation is there. So it's about just changing a few bits around.
Does that help answer your question a bit? Yep. There are obviously some technical ways in terms of going on Tableau server and looking to see who's using each individual dashboard and how often. That's a very useful source of information as well. Yeah. Thanks for that, Rohit. Any other questions from over here? No, excellent. We are completely over time, as you'd expect. But thank you very much, Rohit. Really appreciate it. Another round of applause. Thank you. When do you want to finish before we go into quarter two to go into the last section? Yeah. Okay, so we've got about 45 minutes, which is good. However, technically, you're only allowed 15 minutes in the online room. So what I'm going to suggest we do is break out into online rooms. I think we're going to have about 3. We'll do a random allocation online. The first 15 minutes of this section then will be discussing what your key takeaways were. And then those breakout rooms will close. And then you can spend another 15 minutes writing your action plan. Okay. In here in the room, we'll do the same thing. So we're going to 3 breakout groups. Sarah, you decide whether your team gets split across the 3 groups or you stay in the same one. That's your choice. But the idea is to share your takeaways, because hearing what other people's takeaways are is quite interesting and useful. Thanks, Sherry. So hear about what other people have got to say will help distill, give you a bit of time to also think about what your key takeaways were. Remember what I said at the beginning, though. This is about you coming back again as well. So it's about being able to build up a business case, but more importantly, get some real value from being here, whether it's virtual or in person. So what we want you to do in those small breakout groups is not too much time on introducing each other. Just do a quick who, what, and where. And preferably, well, we know a lot about the travel bucket list, so forget about the travel one, but think about another bucket list, your number 1 bucket list, to introduce yourself and break a bit of ice. And then I want each of you individually to tell each other quickly, run through your key takeaways so far, your ideas and thoughts about what actions and how you might get some benefit and value from what you've heard today from each of the 3 presentations in turn. And then refine that and elaborate in your own plan, picking the 3 next things you need to do or you can do. And specifically, those 3 timeframes are really important. What can you do in the next 10 minutes? What can you do tomorrow or your next working day? And what can you do in your next working week? So expanding that out. What can you do in the next 10 minutes? There's the framework that you can summarize everything into. So that's on the back of the second page. Noting down your top 3 takeaways from Alex's, Sarah's, and Rohit's sessions, but of course, based upon the feedback from other people and the thoughts from other people that maybe you missed, and then clarifying something for you. Here's an example. Rohit, again, I just ran through kickoff meetings, for example, plan touch points and create a SharePoint site, perhaps. If you need feedback and you're using SharePoint, maybe that's a specific example of something that might be useful for you. This is for you, nobody else, right? Your next step, what can you do in the next 5 minutes? Well, the very easiest thing you should always do is just book something in your diary to plan in the next steps in more detail and make that non-negotiable. Put it in your time diary. You can do that in the next 5 minutes, can't you? You can do it right now. So your next step is by today. So that's just an example of where I think you can get some real value from this. Okay, so here in Salesforce Tower, if you want to break up into 3 groups of around about 5 or 6 people, that'd be really cool. We're going to do that also magically online as well. Sarah and Rohit, if you want to wander around, you may want to ask some more additional deeper questions for them when you're in a smaller group, if that's okay. So if you just wander around and join those groups. Feel free to move the furniture around or go and sit somewhere else. It's your choice, okay? But what we'll do is we'll come back here in 30 minutes. Okay, so that's 15 minutes as a group, 15 minutes on your own, and then we'll come back. Okay?
And our in-person attendees, our food is still out. There's loads left. Please eat it.
Because if you don't, we will. Okay, 30 minutes, which makes it 4:35. Thank you. Those online, I will come into each of the individual rooms just in case you've got any questions as well, but let me just set those up. Have you set those up already?
Yeah, there's only 7 people.
That was 15 minutes ago. You scared them off.